Hello and welcome. Welcome to Honest Fundraising, showing donors what's really going on to increase trust and funding. And we are happy to have you joining us and appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules. My name is Kimberly and I'm part of the QGive team. And if you haven't had the opportunity to work with us before, we're an online fundraising platform dedicated to helping nonprofits raise more money. And part of how we do that is through webinars like this one today. So today's webinar will be about 45 minutes with a Q&A session to follow. So keeping our total time together to just about an hour. We are recording the presentation and we will be sending each of you a follow-up email with a link to the recording, a copy of the presentation, as well as some links to some great resources. So please be on the lookout for that email tomorrow afternoon. And we are live tweeting today. So the highlights at a hashtag QGive webinar. So if you are a Twitter user, please follow us and join in the discussion. Our username is QGive. If you do have questions at any point during the presentation, please go ahead, pop them into the Q&A box. Our presenter, Rickesh, is ready to answer and discuss those during our Q&A portion that follows the presentation. And importantly, after today's webinar, you're going to be prompted to take a short 4-question survey, and we'd love it if you did. Your feedback is crucial in determining future content for webinars and other resources that we develop throughout the year. So before diving into today's presentation, just want to take a quick peek at QGive's background, mission, and offerings. QGive has been helping nonprofit organizations implement and grow their online fundraising programs since 2007. And as the importance of online giving has grown, our mission has continued and remained the same, and that is to help others fulfill their passion to make a difference. And we do that through a comprehensive suite of fundraising tools featuring donation forms, event registration, peer-to-peer fundraising, text giving with outbound messaging, and auction events. So today we are excited to introduce you to Rickesh Lakhani, Executive Director at Future Possibility for Kids. Over to you, Rickesh.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here, just a moment, and we'll get that all set up. Okay, we're looking okay here. So first of all, thanks everybody. I'm so grateful that you have chosen this time to spend with me today. If I'm looking in different directions, because I have a few screens open, that's the way I operate, but I am here fully present to hang out with you. I'm Rickesh Lakhani, pronouns he, him, his. Thanks to QGive for hosting this session on honest fundraising to show donors what's really going on and to increase trust and funding. If you're tweeting, my handle is at constant changes, so I will be responding to tweets afterwards. We are going to be using the chat box here and there, and if time permits, there is Q&A. Well, there is going to be time permitted for Q&A, and so I will be checking the chat box periodically, but I just want to let you know this is going to be an interactive session. We don't want to just have me doing all the work. So if you've been to any webinars or presentations I've done before, this might look familiar, but it's always a good reminder that I'm not here. I'm not going to be able to change your life. I can't solve all your problems. There's no magic bullets. You're going to have to do the heavy lifting. I can't do that for you. But what I am here to do, what I can say is that we can talk a little bit more about being more honest and telling more of the truth. Yay. So for example, I have 2 kids that are sick at home today. So I'm a little distracted. That might be why. And I'm also wearing cargo shorts. And also I've used that joke at 2 other presentations before. Now, doesn't that feel great to tell the whole truth, doesn't it? I think that feels really, really good. So what I hope that you're going to get out of this session today is really understand why honesty in fundraising is fundamental and the harms that happen when we aren't fully honest with donors. Also to learn how to build trust and funding through increased transparency and very intentional conversations around this. Fundraising is hard work. It requires listening. It requires relationship building, self-reflection. I can't promise you that any of this is going to be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. I can say we're going to figure out a way to get closer together on doing some of this. So now, as I promised, I'm going to take it to you, our wonderful audience who's here today. What are some things you wish donors would know, but you aren't telling them right now? So type that in the chat box, and I'm just going to maybe give you some more of my own examples as well, but just all those things you've kept on hold for years. You're like, I wish we could talk about this. And all the things you've kept inside, let's get those out of our system. It's a bit therapeutic in a way. And please do keep it clean, all right? But what are those things that you wish you could talk to donors about? What would you like to be able to do? Someone said, what good are you then? If I can't solve all your problems, I think that's what it's in reference to. So yeah, let's hear what you have to say. But here's some of my thoughts. So maybe we can't tell donors that the program didn't work the way that we thought. Maybe we thought that we can't tell them how much work that restricted giving creates inside their organizations. It does, it really does. Perhaps we can't discuss how the hoarding of wealth inevitably creates inequities which require social good organizations to exist in the first place. Of course, I'm working up to that one. That's a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to start looking into the chat box for some of your thoughts here. So what I've got here, okay, so administrative duties are still necessary for nonprofits, and those people still need to be paid a living wage. Bree, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Yes, absolutely. We're like, how can we have organizations that are on about social good and we're underpaying staff? And that has to go back to the funders. You need to increase funding and on an annual basis because it's more expensive to live. I don't know about the US, but in Canada, the cost of living just went up like 6.7% in the last year. So that's really, really important. We've got another one here. I always wish donors knew how much we knew about them, and it shouldn't be seen as creepy when we research them. Oh my gosh, you know what? Thank you, Neil. That is something that we do all the time in corporate environments. They know everything about us. Like seriously, like I was able to recently rocket mail someone's personal email address. I didn't ask for their personal email address, but I got it on rocket mail. I'm like, wow, like what is going on here? They're allowed to do all these things. And when it comes to charities, it's like, well, no, you're not allowed to use readily available research to do your job better. So I mean, as long as it's done ethically, I'm not sure what the issue is. People should know their whole life is sort of, it's on display digitally. So why is it so weird when we do it? I totally agree. This is great. I love the things that are coming forward. Okay, Adriana is talking about if you're a membership-based organization, we need more funds than what our membership dues cover. Yeah, absolutely. It's not enough. Membership fees are, in the history says that that's on decline. And so we need other sources of revenue to support the great work that we're doing. Keep it going on the chat. I'm going to move on to other things, but thank you so much for participating. This session is only going to work if y'all keep doing this. And I'm going to encourage the good folks at QGIF to download this chat afterwards, and I can even help categorize and compile some of this stuff too. But we're not going to get to all the things that we might want to share with donors, but there's a whole other session in here, I'm sure. We can't talk about all the things that would happen. But what would happen if we did open up these conversations, right? A lot of times, like, we can't talk about these things. What about if we thought about it as what would happen? What would be possible if we talked about these things? That is a sneak peek of reframing, which is a very powerful tool that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So here's my next question to everybody. You don't have to answer this in the chat. You could if you want, but why? Why don't we talk about with donors? There must be a reason why we're not having these honest conversations and why we're holding back on these really powerful things that people are sharing in the chat here and that are on your mind. So what are the things? We're afraid of we're going to upset them. We don't know if they're interested in this conversation. There's a power or identity dynamic. Maybe our organization or leaders won't have our back if something doesn't go the way that we thought. To me, it really does come down to, in the end, based on how we're incentivized in fundraising organizations, we're worried that they're not going to give to us. If we tell them this truth, they're going to think lesser of us, or they're not going to give to us. And as I speak in many sessions, we have to recognize there is power at play here. That's the natural hierarchy of things. It does happen. And so depending on your position and your identity, sometimes in these situations, you might opt for self-preservation, especially if you're in an unsupportive environment. And so I totally understand that. So honest fundraising has its time and its place. Hopefully you have leadership and management and an organization that allows you to do this and push forward for the greater good and not just focus solely on how much we're raising in this fiscal year, because that is a scarcity mindset. It's dangerous and it stops us from moving forward as a sector. So what exactly is honest fundraising? What does it mean? What's my terminology for it anyways? So what it is bringing people closer to the organization and the cause through a heightened level of transparency, especially one that we're used to, including all the things that are good and the bad, to increase trust and funding. And just to be clear, I think maybe a lot of people saw this webinar and they probably said, well, we're not lying to donors. I'm like, well, this isn't just about not lying. Honest fundraising is, to me, more about exposing more of that reality. And so that's really what we're trying to talk about here. So I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Imagine you could say these things, and this one actually came up in the chat. We have to pay our staff equitably. Our sector isn't perfect, but we're working on it. We have to invest in ourselves. We have to invest in fundraising and technology. And we're often cleaning up the mess of a flawed system. Imagine saying those things and the reaction. What if we had more conversations like this? Do you think that it might lead to better things? I mean, I think so. I mean, I hope so. I'm leading a webinar about honest fundraising. I really hope I believe in it, and I do. So let me give you an example, is that we had an organization that called us up when a previous job and said, we want to donate 10,000 plates. Can you take them? And here's the catch. They wanted us to pick them up in our own transportation. They wanted it done this week. They wanted a tax receipt and they wanted credit for all that stuff. And so I was just like, okay, can I just say no, thank you? Or can I say, actually, you know what? I don't want you to unleash you on some other organizations either. These are used plates. Not to say that used plates couldn't be valuable somewhere, but I'm like, we're just calling around, most charities won't be able to do it. You'll have to offer to deliver it for them. They may not give you a tax receipt because they're going to have to figure out how to assess the value of 10,000 used plates. And they're going to need a little bit more time to arrange this. So if I didn't say those things, I wasn't being fully honest. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, okay? So sometimes that we are often quick to place the blame on others, but I really think it's important, and I will talk about this throughout, self-reflection. What role are we playing in this? It's not enough to only look at others. We have to look at certain things that we're doing that may not always be fully truthful, okay? And I hope that for those of you that might be doing these things, it's not a personal attack, but I hope you'll join me on this journey of doing a little bit of difficult self-exploration. What if somebody gives $25,000 and they're going to give it to you no matter what? And you say, we're going to make that a matching gift to inspire other people's giving. Well, it's not really a match. You were going to get the money anyways. And what I often see is that there's a $25,000 gift and they get $100,000 in funds. And that last $75,000 of folks were not told that their gifts were not going to be matched. There was no like, hey, y'all, we've reached our match limit now. So, you can still give, but the matching has been exhausted. That doesn't happen. Is that honest? I'm not sure. So I got to go to the chat for a second. Someone says we were offered $500,000 of hand sanitizer. We said no. Good on you. I mean, hand sanitizer was worth its weight in gold in the last couple of years, but that's a lot of hand sanitizer. So saying our administrative costs are zero was because someone's funding them. It doesn't mean our administrative costs are zero. And that's perpetuating some really, really harmful things. This sector halo where we're working as charities, we can, or nonprofits or whatever we are, we're incapable of doing wrong, which is absolutely not true. And also not speaking up when someone donates perhaps junk and you just accept it. Oh, thank you so much. And we should be happy with whatever we get. It's like, actually, no, we can't accept that. And here's why. For example, $500,000 worth of hand sanitizer. So we have to lead by example here, right? And part of that is removing harmful and questionable practices and advocating to break some of these harmful cycles. So what happens when we hold back reality from donors? What's the impact of that? Well, one thing to me is a big one is I understand the marketing push to put it in one line, put it in 5 words, make it simple. I get it in certain contexts, but if we're sitting down one-on-one with somebody, especially, right? We're oversimplifying complex social issues. How do we get people to embrace the messiness of that? Because we are. So let's bring them into that. We're talking about poverty, we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about funding arts, we're talking about climate change or whatever your cause is. These are not simple issues. So when we oversimplify them, we take away the chance, as I say in the third point there, to educate and to connect with somebody and bring them in closer to our work. The other thing we're doing is we're creating false and unrealistic expectations. So we're totally perpetuating things that are actually harmful to the overall sector, and that's not a good thing. So this is what happens when we hold back reality. I think it's really important that we embrace this to move the conversation forward. So when we're talking about preparing for these honest fundraising conversations, how can we prepare for this? Because it's not easy, right? We got to do some prep. We can't just walk in there. So the question is, this little baby is asking and scratching their head, how can we prepare for honest fundraising conversations? To me, there's 3 kind of key elements of this. First, you got to know your organization and the environment that you're in. You got to know the donor. You got to know a little something about them. And you definitely have to know yourself. And that's, again, that self-reflection piece, which we'll get into. So let's talk about the organization first, right? What are some of the things you should know about your organization? What are the real pain points in your organization that are caused by donors that you've just kind of accepted that this is just the way it is, but they shouldn't be? Is that an opportunity to have a connection here? What is something about your work that you often keep hidden out of fear? Those things that I said earlier, fear of not giving, fear of getting in trouble, fear of not being supported. What would help external people to our organization truly understand our cause that they don't often hear about? That to me is a differentiator. They're not often hearing about it from others. A lot of times when I've gone into situations and it's said more of the full truth, I actually get thanked. People are like, oh my gosh, why has no one ever told that to me. And I'm like, the truth is, I think we're coddling donors, right? We're coddling them. Why are we trying to hide this from them? And then the other question is, what does management and leadership support look like for you if things don't go well? And again, that's critical, because you might have this personal endeavor to want to go do this, and then you have a conversation with the donor, and most of the time it goes well. Let's say it doesn't. Then do they have your back? Because if they don't, then I can understand why this may be a little bit more precarious. So that's maybe a little bit something about knowing your organization. Knowing the donor, and we're talking about prospect research. We have these relationships. Hopefully you're tracking some information and knowing what the donor's interests are, or their giving history, or anything like that. Knowing a little bit more about the donor will definitely help if you're having conversations. And that's in a group environment or an individual. If you're doing annual campaign, hopefully you have an idea of some larger subset of what those donors are all about and the composition there. So these self-assessment tools I'm showing you here, the disc profile, 4 colors, four circles with different colored sections there. And I don't love all these tools. Some of them are flawed, but I like the disc profile. The best thing that they do for us is not necessarily define who we are. People are always like, I don't want to be in a box, in true colors. I don't want to be blue. I want to be green. But what they do is they help us understand that not everybody thinks the way that we do. And we also kind of gravitate to more one of these styles. So the goal is, how do we start to make it so that we're really understanding where our donor is coming from, so that we can target our listening to our speaking to where they might be listening from. So for example, DISC, as I said, is one of my favorite profile assessments. Are they a driven, ambitious, and kind of push forward, dominant, or D type? Are they a social, chatty influencer, I type? Are they a data-driven, thoughtful, analytical, C type? Or are they a behind the scenes kind of supportive steadiness, or S type? I mean, none of these are bad or good, but knowing this about yourself and others will help you target your conversations. So here's an example. Let's say we're talking about, giving unrestricted funds, which is a common one I always hear about. How do we get donors to give unrestricted funds? Well, for a C type, you might actually present data on, hey, this is how long it takes and the kind of time it takes and energy it takes for us to manage some of these restricted funds, and the lack of flexibility that it creates. For an S type, you might want to talk more about how to be supportive of the organization's goals, and so on. So you can see that you're kind of saying a similar thing, but the information you present and how you present it would be defined on knowing a little something about the donor. Again, this could be a whole other session here, but we don't have time to get too much deeper into it, but gives you an idea of what you're thinking about. And know yourself. Self-reflection absolutely is a critical part of this. You need to know yourself. What is holding you back? What is getting in your way from having these conversations? What are your perceptions of donors and giving and social good work? What are your fears and concerns? What would it take for you to embrace these kinds of conversations more? And where might you need some coaching and support from others? I know for me, I always come out to have one of these conversations, and it's a pretty big one. I'm calling up a few of people, my speed dial, and I'm saying, hey, can we talk this through? And I can kind of talk about the different ways this might go, and help me with my wording and my approach, right? So it takes a little bit of reflection and practice too. So I will always continue to put things back to you, because you do have a role here. It's not just about others. So as Homer Simpson is saying here, what is holding me back, right? Now, this infinite frame picture here is talking about reframing. So this is a very, very powerful tool. And so you can't really control other people, but you can control your own actions. So really do think about how you're positioning things. And sometimes it really is just about the packaging. So here, for example, the first one here, we need a multi-year gift. That's what you want to say. But that might be a little, if you're dealing with a dominant D type, they might actually go for that. But maybe an approach more like, by contributing over a few years, you can ensure programming remains in the community. That's always been my thing. So I'm like, I want to give you the gift, and I want you to support this program, and I'll do it for 1 year. I'm like, we hope these programs last a little bit longer than a year. And what about that would take us away from our mission? Here are some initiatives that are more closely aligned with our mission. So instead of just saying, well, that's going to give us mission creep, right? We're going to actually say, these are some things that might actually align and overlap on that Venn diagram with your interests and what we're actually doing here. Or what you want to say is, wow, you really don't understand our cause, which is often the case. We're living this. I don't expect a donor or funder or anybody volunteer to know as much as we do about the work we're doing always. Sometimes they do, but how can you kind of position that? I would love to continue the conversation to increase your understanding of our work over time. So those are some kind of reframing examples that you can consider when you're doing this. It's pretty important. So you're probably like, well, Rickesh, you keep talking about this, right? So what have you done? Well, I'll give you some examples. Here are some things that I've actually said to donors and funders. So our organization operates in underserved communities. That's the terminology that we use. and trying to put them in the mindset of that. I say, why do you think some communities are underserved in the first place? And I have some ideas of why that is, but I'd love to hear what they think. It's just, it gets them thinking. And I've the conversations I've had coming out of that are like, wow, I haven't really thought about that. I just thought some people are rich, some people don't have as much, and what they share is quite telling as to where they might be at, and it makes them think in a deeper way, and maybe hopefully getting them to a systems level thinking, right? Virtually no one is fundraising, so no one is funding fundraising, so we can't invest in ourselves. And so people are like, well, why don't you grow? Why don't you do this? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to grow irresponsibly. If we don't have the funds committed for the long term, I'm not going to be able to hire staff, because I don't want to hire somebody for 6 months and have to let them go and pull a program back. So then I say part of it is people aren't funding fundraising, so we can't raise more money to do this work. We're not able to put forward a specific number of children that we're going to be reaching in this proposal we're giving you, because there's so many variables that are out of our control. So saying that to somebody who's used to being like, I need metrics, I need deliverables, I need to know how many children, and that's so it's like we're trading money for KPIs, and it doesn't feel right. And so for me, moving away from that, and it's not to say we don't have a vision, we don't have dreams of how big we want our reach to get, and or how much deeper we want to go in our work, or just becoming really good at doing the same thing. That's also okay for me. But having that conversation with donors takes a bit of that pressure off, because I think a lot of times we strive so much for that number. Either I've seen it happen, people game that number, or the lengths that we go through to achieve commitments we've made to donors is honestly sometimes very harmful too. So you can see what I'm talking about here is not just conversations with donors, it is putting a lens back to ourselves. Also, we have to always be mindful of white saviorism in our work. I said this to our board of directors. And we have a lot of folks from, let's say, corporate space in our world. They've maybe never even heard that term before, or heard it, but didn't really understand it. And I'm like, we're a matching-based organization, and we have to make sure that we're not having folks coming in and thinking that they're going to be saving anybody or fixing anybody. So these are like very open, honest things that have really almost always led to good conversations and better outcomes. At worst, it's been that they just are like, oh, okay, they kind of don't really listen, but I haven't really had it come to a situation where someone's like, I'm never supporting your organization again. This is absolutely terrible. So I'll give you some examples of some real life, case studies of things that have happened in my own organization, right? And so one of them was actually speaking with a board member who used a term that I would believe would be harmful, and I actually shared that with them in a very respectful way. I was like, hey, actually the term that we use is this, because that term that you're using is not appropriate for these reasons. And he said, thank you. He's like, thank you. I would keep going off and telling other people using that terminology. And he went into the next board meeting and actually shared how powerful and important that was, because it led him on a journey to kind of look at his own perceptions and language. We had a funder. Now, I will say this is a funder who did ask, in all fairness, what do we need to fund that is hard to fund? They did ask me that. So when I had the opening, I could have chose to hold back, or I could just let it rip. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell you the full truth. So I told them all the things that would support our growth, but that weren't necessarily directly programming related, although everything technically is one way or the other, and that nobody else is going to be funding. And so by telling them that, they're like, you know what, if you do those things, you'll be able to fundraise better for yourself and be more sustainable. So that led to a $250,000 commitment over 3 years. And they basically funded a revamp of our website. They funded 3 years of a commitment to a full-time fundraising staff, because I pushed that. I'm like, I was an ED. I'm like, I'm doing all the fundraising myself. It's not sustainable. And launching our CRM system. And that was very, very powerful. So when you have those opportunities, what are you going to do with those? And if I didn't have that honest conversation, we wouldn't be where we are now. Also, we secured the largest gift in our history by talking to a couple about unrestricted multi-year funding with no commitment on KPIs. And they were interested in, was there new programming? Is there something else you're doing? And I was like, this is why it's important to fund existing programming, especially during a global pandemic. And that led to the largest 3-year commitment in our organization's history. So imagine we just went with what the donors asked for and didn't put anything into question. It wouldn't have gone very well, or it wouldn't have got these extra results that I'm talking about. Okay, you know what? We're about close to halfway through. This is enough of me talking, right? I really promised that we're going to get you into this mind space. So let's actually work through some of these, but not just me, you too. I'm going to put up a specific phrase that you've heard, which is addresses something you'd like to be more truthful with donors about. And I'm happy to start it off with some suggestions, which I'll speak to verbally. I'll do that. But I really want you to type in the chat box how you might approach this particular thing. So we're going to call them mini workshops. And remember that the response also depends on how your audience best receives information, but just throw out some ideas. Let's see what we can do here. Okay, so mini workshop number 1 is that I want my donation to go to this very specific thing. When you hear that, what is it that you might say to somebody, right? What might you say to somebody who's like, I really want to allocate my donation to this specific thing, and you're really looking for unrestricted funding right now? What could you say? I'll give you some ideas while you're typing in the chat. I would try to understand, well, what's the goal you're trying to achieve? Can you tell me more about this? I want to understand where it's coming from. If they're trying to donate to something specific, obviously they have particular goals and interests in mind. I would say something perhaps like, our programs are important to what we do, and there's also a number of other functions within our organization that ensure our programs are well supported, resourced, and sustainable. And these funds would be very much supporting this specific initiative, but also ensuring that our organization can operate to sustain it. I was bringing it back to the bigger picture and what we're trying to push for, which is that mission-based funding. You know, what is it about that initiative that appeals to you? Trying to find out where they're coming from and then redirect it back to the larger, right? And then here's another thing. This is a sticking point, because like, what I'm really interested in this program, well, guess what? We can still tell you what's happening in that particular program or initiative. We can still do that. It's just the funding won't be restricted there. We've done that before too. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat now. I'm glad you're passionate about the cause. Tell me more. Yes, Stephanie, tell me more. It's such a powerful statement. Tell me more. Can you tell me more? Get them talking. It'll tell you a lot, and then listen. May I ask what your passion is? Bria is saying, I think there are a lot of programs here that match your heart. This is Sarah. We so appreciate your openness to donate. What is inspiring you to donate to this cause? May I share more about how unrestricted funds ultimately support your passion for our mission? And by the way, QGIve, please do download this chat box, because I'm like, I take from this and I learn too, and it shapes me. Like, these are like wonderful to hear how other people might phrase this. Let's discuss the program. I want to make sure that we match your donation for the best match with your passions. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that passion is like, when we put a donor into a space to be like, do you want to support this program, or do you want like the organization to be able to support that program into the future? And that's what I really try to do, is bring them back to the bigger picture. And don't underestimate donors. Don't disrespect them. They can handle it, right? It might not always work, but I will say, you may not always get a shift in funding, but there's 0% chance if you don't even talk about it, right? Okay, wow. Well, so far, y'all have been very, very participative in this chat box, and that helps me a lot, or I'm sitting here on my own, which is not good. So thank you so much. Let's go into mini workshop number 2. So this is something, and I've heard some things along these lines before. A donor has some stereotypes in their mind about who they're supporting and says, those poor people I'm giving to wouldn't need help if they worked harder. So, you know, I hear that. If I hear something like that, I shift my seat a little bit, bite my tongue a little bit, like, okay, let's really like just prepare for what I'm going to respond back. But we know we can't let that stand as it is, because that perception is harmful, right? And so when we talk about, even if they believe that, it's more likely for them to give because they're like, this is the position I want to be in when I'm giving, that doesn't mean that it's okay. When our goal is not always just to raise more money, it's also to shift donor perceptions and shift societal perceptions of the work and the communities being served. So in this situation, I'll tell you some of the things that I might say. As we said before, can you tell me more about that? What do you believe are some of the reasons that people experience poverty? Can I share some research or information with you which shows that this is also a systemic issue? This is not just based on individual performance, and try to have that opportunity to share more about why this is not just about people not working hard. It's way more complicated than that, as we know. Okay. Can I share with you what someone going through one of our programs is typically experiencing in their life? Absolutely, give a whole picture. It's not just that they're not working hard. There may be so many other elements at play. For example, we've seen that different identities, different life situations are more likely to negatively impact you in terms of things like this. So it's not just that you didn't work hard. There's no bootstraps. Anyone who says that I just pulled up by my bootstraps and did it all on my own, that's not true. Somewhere along the way, there were either hidden or not so hidden advantages, or somebody supported them and they just didn't realize it. Nobody does this on their own. Tell me more about what you know and what you might wonder about the folks, or what you might wonder about the folks that we are supporting or helping. From Stephanie. Yeah, that's it. Tell me more. Let's try to get to their perceptions. Let's try to get them talking about what they believe. Okay. I can understand, because this is from Sarah, I can understand why it may seem like that on the outside, Do I like that one? Because you're acknowledging where their thought might be coming from, because that's more likely to open them up. Say, hey, I see why you might think that. Though there's often other factors at play, both visible and behind the scenes. Can we talk about some of the factors that lead to different situations for different people? Mentally clicking all half of these, this is great. Thank you. Okay, well, again, thanks everyone for participating in this chat. We're going to go on to mini workshop number 3. Okay. And keep going, type away in the chat. I'm sure it's helpful for others too, because I don't have all the answers. We have it all as a collective together. We can sort these things out. So mini workshop number 3 is a very, very common one. It's, I don't want to fund salaries or administrative costs. And I'm just like asking myself, like, in our organization, we're staff driven, we're person to person. I'm like, if you don't fund salaries, then like, who's doing the work, right? Like, what do you think happens inside this mysterious box? So what I might say is, what do you believe administrative costs are, or what are they used for? What is it about those usages that you find problematic? Can you give examples? So, and then another thing is, give examples of other situations, which I've totally opened eyes by doing this. I didn't make this up, but like the idea of the restaurant where someone only wants to fund the food and the ingredients, but not the electricity, the servers, the chefs, the insurance, right? Like all that kind of stuff. And when I do that parallel, it almost makes people really understand how ludicrous it is to say, we're going to do this work without funding people, right? Because people, that's the critical part of this whole thing. So that restaurant analogy, and there's others like it, but I've heard about like there's like a bakery where I just want to buy the donuts. I don't want to pay for the oven cost. It's like, can you hear yourself, right? So sometimes that parallel is another way to go. And I think also just sharing that these are all part of the cost it takes to make the programs go. And we're going to be real with you about them. And that's where we as charities have to stop hiding that. And stop hiding behind it and making those things evil. Stop saying that we have a 3% administrative costs or no administrative costs. Say it proudly. We pay our staff properly. We properly invest in ourselves. Do you want to support that? And maybe if you don't, it's not the right fit for you as an organization. That's another part of honesty. Sometimes you might have to say no if it's not a fit. All right. So that's again probably a whole other session which I've got brewing in my head. So look, we can't. So let's see what. Let's go to the chat, shall we? I want to hear. Okay, Araya, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I've also heard a sports metaphor. You want to fund a golf tournament and only buy the balls. Yeah, exactly. It's like tangible. I want to support the balls. It's like there's way more than that. Okay. I appreciate your passion for our programs. Here's how our administrative costs are vital to the success of our organization. That's from Grant. That is like, man, going directly at it. You don't have to come around about or sugarcoat all this stuff. Sometimes it's just having a really direct response or direct phrase like that. I so appreciate your honesty. Would you like to share more? It's from Sarah. Would you like to share more about why? I would love them to share more about how investing in a culture of equitable pay ensures the sustainability of our mission by investing in staff, wellness, success, and retention. Oh my gosh, yes, like absolutely. Again, if folks are coming from different environments, government, corporate, whatever, like this is something that they would understand and hopefully be trying to do as well. So why wouldn't we be trying to do this here, especially in a sector that is supposed to be about social good? And we're going to be out here not doing these equitable things. And it does relate to the funding. So I've, for example, built in cost of living increases into funding applications. And then I explain why. It's a multi-year, it's a 3-year grant I'm applying for. And I know I'm going to be, if we don't do that in the grant application, where do you think the money's going to come from? And they might question me and ask me about it, but I think they've all been like, oh yeah, we've never seen that before, but it makes sense. Sometimes they don't. Okay, so thank you again so much all for taking part in these mini workshops. Hopefully you'll have some more examples that you've thought of and you can think of them on your own and some ideas that you might have on how to respond. I want to share some more things with you. So I find a lot of times in this space and sector, and for myself too, sometimes you know what you want to do and you feel ready to do it. You literally just don't know the words to say. So hopefully the chat box today has kind of helped with some of that. I'm going to share with you, you have the slides already. You should have got them if you registered, but I'm going to share with you a little bit about these sentence starters that can maybe help you open up some of these conversations. So introducing honest topics. I want to share something with you out of respect for your support of our organization. You deserve to know that. You may not always hear this from organizations, brackets, they usually don't, but I think it's important that you know. I appreciate that sharing it with you may be a risk, but I didn't want to leave this conversation without you knowing that. So I think there's a few different framings that you can use, but I've actually said that before. I'm like, I'm kind of taking a risk here by telling you this potentially because you may not like it, but I wanted to share this with you because I think you should know. And then to get them talking, of course, tell me more. Can you tell me more? What is your current understanding of this issue? Why do you think that organizations like ours may not always share this with you? Get them thinking about some of the dynamics there that, hey, yeah, maybe charities are afraid to tell me because I'm afraid I won't give. What information would help to increase your understanding of this? And we can follow up with that information. Given what I've just shared, I like this as a litmus test, whatever you want to call it, like a pulse check. How might that change how you view your giving? So we've had these conversations, we've talked about things. Has that changed anything for you? You're still in the same spot. Have you reflected and maybe think that something might be a little bit different for you now? And then to build understanding and move forward, help me understand, a great sentence starter. And sometimes you're just not agreeing, but like, I feel like we're not on the same page, but I would like to get us there. So let's keep talking. Let's still work this through. And then I believe there's a way for both of us to get what we're looking for. So if you feel like there's no overlap in that Venn diagram, I love Venn diagrams, by the way, but if you feel like there's no overlap in the two circles, well, let's see what we can do to create some of that. And just please share more about that. So those are some actual phrases. You can feel free to steal these. These aren't mine to use. They're yours if you'd like to use them, if they help shape your thinking. I also want to share with you some resources. I don't have the website links here, but you can look these up. And these are resources and initiatives that are really trying to reshape how we think about fundraising and philanthropy and how they look. I encourage you to look them up and how can we make fundraising and philanthropy better for everyone? Community-centric fundraising is a big push, and they actually have principles of how to do this. And a lot of that is, not just doing what donors say. Trust-based philanthropy, that's more directed at funders, but it's still interesting philosophies around how you should really just be giving funding to the groups that you trust and then letting them do their work in the best way possible. So if we support the trust-based philanthropy movement, that will also help support people who are being funded. Then there's some podcasts, the Ethical Rainmaker, the Small Nonprofit podcast. I know it's Ontario, but these topics they range across, they'll be applicable across a wide variety of geographies. The Ontario Nonprofit Network Digging In podcast. So I do encourage you to check those out. Sarah's saying Venn diagrams, high five, yes, thank you. I really do think that they're quite amazing. So I do want you to check out those other resources and initiatives and do some independent learning. This is not going to be solved in a 45-minute or 50-minute session. So now go, implement this and start practicing these skills, start being more honest, start educating and engaging, and then do it again. Do it again, like this shampoo or soap bottle, lather, rinse, repeat, right? And you will get better at this the more that you do it. I know I have. I was very fumbly at first, and I still fumble sometimes. But the more I do it, the better I get at it. And here's the thing about all this. First, let me just acknowledge David here. Our United Way has moved from restricted to unrestricted funding because of trust-based philanthropy. Yes, beautiful. I used to work for United Way. I know how much of a change that is. That's very, very powerful. Thank you for that example. So people are doing it. So here's my thing. If you don't do something differently out of this, and you just go back to your regular life after this webinar, because trust me, I know how busy y'all are. I know the sector you're in. You're busy. But if you don't do something differently coming out of this, I will not have done my job. And I really want to see you succeed here, okay? So we've talked about a lot here. And I want you to do something for me, okay? To keep moving forward. I want you to choose 2 to 3 honest conversations that you're going to have, and by when. Okay, so write that down, type it in the chat if you're feeling brave, like who's the brave souls that are going to actually say, here's 2 to 3 conversations that I'm looking to actually have, and I'm going to do it by this date. Write it down, type it out, email it to yourself with a reminder, whatever you have to do, put it in your calendar. But I just really do want you to embrace this. And the only way you can do that is by actually doing it. And so, yeah, if you put it in the chat here, you'll have some accountability buddies, perhaps, to make this move a little bit longer. Who are the brave souls that will come forward and do this? So we really need to move from telling donors what we think they want to hear to what they need to hear. And that's a statement that I just heard from a colleague, Arundel Gibson. We were talking and she shared that with me. I was like, okay, yes, we do need that. That was just within the last week. So I was like, very relevant. I'm going to share it with you. And here's my other question to you is, if we don't say something when we have the chance to, how do we expect anything to change? That's my real question. But guess what? I know that you got this, okay? As this little puppy is pointing to you saying, you got this, that's me. Pretend I'm that puppy. I believe that you can do this, and we will make fundraising and philanthropy better for your organization, your cause, and for all of us. And if you want any help, you want to reach out, you want to talk this through, hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, and I've started a very amateur TikTok account at Charity Dad, if you want to check that out too. So that is Honest Fundraising, and I thank you so much for your time, for listening to me. And I think we're going to, Kimberly's even just appearing back. We're going to go on to some Q&A.
Yes, well, Rickesh, wow. And thank you. Gosh, everyone, this has been such a great chat today. But no one has put anything in the Q&A now. So I guess I will ask everyone if you have some questions you'd like to put into the Q&A. I know that a couple folks couldn't make it today, so they sent us some questions too, which we can field one or two of those while you hopefully are typing up. So Rickesh, can you share a time when honest fundraising didn't go the way you expected?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm so sorry. I think there was an issue with my slides sharing. So I don't know. Everyone had the slides, hopefully. I'm so sorry, but was there an issue with my, oh no, or did you just take that over?
Oh, I just took it back over because
Oh,
we're in the question section.
okay. Yeah, I figured if something went wrong, you would have told me. I'm paranoid for a second there. Whew.
No,
Okay.
no, you're good.
Okay. So that's right. You used your power and you took the control back. So when it didn't go as well as I thought, well, or the way that I planned. I mean, I've had conversations. So we had an event that someone was doing. It was a third-party event, and they were hosting it, and it was a virtual event. And during that event, they said something that was quite harmful to the communities that we serve. It is a fundraising event. So I know when I talked to this person after, they were like, well, we were doing it because we're trying to raise money and get people interested in the cause. And I was like, well, yeah, but we can't say that. And so I said I would, it was a 2-night event. I'm like, can you say something about this the next night? Can you issue an apology or whatever, and just say this is not actually reflective of the organization, and not really willing to do that. So I'm like, can you give me the email addresses of people who registered that were from the community that we invited, at least, right? Because we invited a bunch of folks. We invited parents of our programming to come, right? And so for them to come to this event and hear this being said about children that are taking part in the program, it was harmful. So I said, I want their email addresses, and I'm going to send them a note. And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I really do want this to be something that we address directly and say, this is not what we believe. Talk to the speaker. The speaker understood, the host understood, and they apologized. They said, no, I get why that's harmful. I won't say that again. And so this is someone who's fundraising for us, lots of money, virtual event. And I did a gut check, and I took a big swallow. I was like, okay, I got to say something here because I can't leave that standing. So what I didn't expect was how it would go. I didn't expect the person to be sort of very defensive and being very, challenged and understanding. I really thought they would understand it from where I would, but this is what happens a lot. People are like, they don't want to think of themselves in a negative way. That's why I'm addressing it to the behavior and not the person, right? I'm like, you're not a bad person. I'm not saying you're bad. I'm saying the thing that you said would cause harm to the communities that we serve. And I don't want to leave that going. I couldn't leave it without saying something to you. And so that was not what I expected. It definitely caused a bit of a rift in our sort of relationship for a while. But I'm really glad I did it. I would never look back on that.
That was a great now someone just typed in that you've covered so much and it's been so good they don't have questions, so we'll just go to a couple other pre-submitted questions. So what if we would like to do this but our management team is not supportive of us sharing more of the truth with donors?
Yeah So this is a tough one. I do a lot of presentations, webinars, and most of them are more about what mindset now than actual fundraising tactics, to be honest. Because a lot of times I think we agree, and especially the folks that are signing up to be here, you're at least somewhat bought into this concept. But then you run into a roadblock. You're like, hey, we're going to start being more honest with donors. And then I was like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to risk our funding. And so then I will say this, and I say this to any fundraiser who asks, if you don't have a board and leadership that is supportive of moving and making progress in some of these things, it's going to be a real uphill battle. I will just be honest about that. And it might not be worth the effort, but you can use some of these honest fundraising concepts and actually apply them to your management. You can actually say, well, what is it that they need to hear? What is it that I can be honest about and saying, I actually feel like, if we're not telling this to donors, we're actually doing them a disservice. Like, how can you open up some of these conversations within your own walls? But in the end, I think a lot of it is, if they're not going to support you and you're taking a risk by doing this, then it may not necessarily be an environment that's conducive to this. And I'm not saying it's just easy to up and leave, but over time, if you're trying to enact change as a change maker within your org and you don't have the positional power necessarily to do it based on your title, then it might be time to start thinking, well, I want to do this work. Where can I do it better? But again, I'm not telling you to leave your jobs, but I'm just saying, try within your org, do what you can, get allies alongside you, other teammates, other colleagues. Perhaps there's 1 or 2 people within the board or leadership that actually would embrace this. Get them on your side as well, because that peer-to-peer we know is very powerful. But then in the end, if you're doing everything and you're just running into problems and you're now getting kind of villainized because you're trying to shake this up, then I think there's some bigger questions at play. That's
Well,
my honest answer.
and I think that is straight up, but I say you're going to get the link to this webinar tomorrow. Schedule time to have those folks hopefully see the recording and kind of go through everything we've gone through today. That might be helpful. So we do have a question from Sarah. After 2 years of not seeing many donors face to face, it feels like relationships aren't as strong as they once were. How can we broach some of these conversations in this less than ideal virtual spaces, email, Zoom, calls? When do we get the chance to meet them in person again? How do we build the foundation of trust up again to get these conversations going?
Wow, that's a good question. Actually, that's one I might actually invite if the chat is open, as we have been doing. Again, I'm not sitting here with all the answers, never claiming that I do. I wonder if folks in the chat might answer it. I can give you my initial thoughts to that is there's a lot of donors, first of all, right now who don't want to meet in person. I think a lot of them have realized they can do a lot of their giving and do it via phone or virtually. I mean, we've had success with that. I haven't met with many donors at all in person in the last while. I actually think though, Sarah, that this may be that opportunity. Like you're meeting folks face to face and say, you know what, I've been doing a lot of thinking in the last couple of years and being like, I really want to be more open and upfront, honest with donors. We haven't had a chance to meet so much. There's like, I want to accelerate our conversations forward, and I want to build trust, and I want to recognize that we haven't had a chance to do that. So to me, this might actually be a platform to re-engage in conversation and build trust a little bit more quickly when we're having that openness. So I'm trying to picture if I have a donor I haven't maybe like had a conversation with in like a little while, and I pick up the phone, we call them, and they're like talking to me. I'm like, you know what? I feel like in our previous interactions, I feel like there's more I could have told you and I didn't. And here might be the reasons why. Can I start sharing a little bit more with you about some of the ways that we operate and why it's important for you to know that, and just see what they have to say? Maybe it's a trust building tool. Well, that's a new thought, by the way, for me, but it's a great question.
Okay, well, thank you. And Sarah, I hope that helps. Neil has asked regarding matching gifts, do you feel there's an ethical and transparent way to use that fundraising tool for those donors who will respond to it?
Yeah, actually, I have it. Again, this could be a whole other webinar. It's on matching gifts. We know that matching gifts work. That's the evidence is there. When you have a matching gift, people are more likely to give for sure. Funny enough, it's not always the percentage of that match. Even a 50% match, then you go to like a 2 or 3. I've got mail from orgs like, we're doing a quintuple X match. And I'm like, wow, like that seems a little bit far-fetched. So I'm like, you should save some of that matching dollars because having a 5X match doesn't even matter. But to answer your question, I do think there is a way to do it ethically. It's just a little bit risque. Make sure that the matching gift is more than you likely think you're going to raise or did raise in previous years. So last year you raised $50,000 and someone's introducing a matching gift, make the matching gift 75 or make it at a ratio that would make you raise 75. So there's actual a legitimate risk of not getting all the funding, and have you be in a position to actually have to like commit that to the donor. Now this sounds like you're like, Rickesh, that doesn't make any sense. You're actually telling us to advocate for less money. I'm like, no, but if you want to be honest and truthful about a match, that's one way to do it. The other is to have a match that only matches certain categories of funding. So I've seen a match where it's for new donors or donors that increase their giving by 10% over previous year. So they're going to match those specific pieces only. It doesn't do anything for your current donors, except maybe hopefully make them give more. So those are some ways that you can use matching gifts ethically. I'm not saying that writing them off as a whole. The way that I see it done sometimes, where I'm like, that donor literally hands you a check for 50,000. You say, can we use this to inspire other people to give? We already have the money in our bank account. Let's make a $50,000 match. I don't like that.
Okay.
Does that help, Dave? I hope that helps.
Well, do we have any other questions or comments? We'll be ending a little bit early, but I think we've covered everything so far. Going once, going twice. Well, okay, Rickesh, thank you. This was awesome. This was some incredible information, and I really thank everyone for joining us today. We again are emailing out a recording of today, as well as a link to the presentation and some other great resources. If you would like to reach out to the QGIve team or Rickesh, the contact information is on this last slide, and again, will come out to you tomorrow afternoon. As you are leaving today, please take the survey if you see that prompt. And we hope the information we covered today helps you with your fundraising, your honest fundraising. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Rickesh. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.